September 19th, 1944. Arracourt, Lorraine, France. The dawn breaks cold and gray over the rolling fields of eastern France. A curtain of fog crawls low across the ground, swallowing hedgerows, silencing birds, and muffling the engines of tanks waiting in ambush. Somewhere in that haze, a single M4A3 Sherman idles quietly. Inside, Sergeant Robert Early of the 37th Tank Battalion checks his periscope again and again. The glass is beaded with moisture. He can barely see more than a few hundred yards. The crew barely speaks, only the hiss of the intercom and the faint rattle of loose shell casings. Then, through the fog, a darker shape moves. A Panther OSFG. 45 tons of steel, gliding forward with the confidence of a predator. Its long 75mm gun swings left, then right, like an animal scenting prey. Early whispers into the mic. Target front. Range, 300. The gunner adjusts. A deep metallic clunk echoes through the hull. The loader's hands tremble slightly on the shell. In that suspended moment, nothing exists but breath, steel, and silence. The Panther fires first. The blast rips through the mist, a white-hot tracer screaming past the Sherman's hull, showering dirt and shards of grass. Inside, the crew ducks instinctively, then retaliates. "On the way!" the gunner shouts. The Sherman 75 roars back, smoke filling the turret. Through the periscope, Early sees the German tank pivot too late. A plume of flame bursts from its side, rolling upward like a burning flag. The men don't cheer, they just breathe again. For now, they are alive. The fog begins to lift, revealing a dozen more shapes on the horizon. They thought the Panther couldn't be stopped. They were wrong. Summer of 1944. France burns beneath the boots of two armies. After the fall of Normandy, the roads east are a river of dust and fuel. The American column surging forward, the German divisions retreating, bruised but not broken. To stop them, Berlin unleashes its pride. The Panther, sleek, angled, and deadly. 45 tons of steel, 8 centimeters of sloped armor, and the long 75mm L-70 gun, capable of piercing any Allied tank at twice the range. German engineers call it Panzerkampfwagen 5. Its silhouette is low, its lines perfect, its confidence absolute. Crews climb inside believing they're untouchable. Der Panther ist unbesiegbar. Nur ein Narr würde frontal angreifen. The Panther is unbeatable. Only a fool would attack it head-on. That was written in a tank commander's diary outside Nancy, just days before the Battle of Arracourt. To the Wehrmacht, quality is salvation. Germany can no longer match the Allies in numbers, not in tanks, fuel, or men. But it still believes that precision can defeat mass. Factories run under bombing raids, assembling machines of elegance and terror, each one a masterpiece of steel and over-engineering. On the other side of the line, American tankers see it differently. Their M4 Sherman isn't beautiful. It rattles. It leaks. Its armor can be punched through by almost anything the Germans throw at it. But it runs. It starts every morning. And when it breaks, you can fix it with a wrench and a prayer. General George S. Patton doesn't care for perfection. He cares for movement. He tells his men, speed is armor. Reliability is firepower. To Patton, the Panther is a fortress, impressive but slow, while the Sherman is a swarm. 1,000 moving targets that can strike from any direction, any time. Still, for the men inside those American tanks, the myth of the Panther looms large. They've seen what one shell can do. A clean shot through the hull, a burst of orange light, 5 lives erased in a heartbeat. A Across Europe, Allied intelligence circulates photographs and cautionary notes. Avoid frontal engagement. Flank if possible. Even the bravest know the odds. In September, the German High Command moves to prove its faith one last time. 2 Panzer brigades, fresh from the east, are ordered west, toward Lorraine. Their mission: cut Patton's Third Army in half and reclaim the ground lost since Normandy. The German generals believe the fog, the open fields, and the Panthers' long guns will give them the edge. They see the Americans as reckless, untested boys in thin-skinned machines. But war has a way of punishing arrogance. What the Wehrmacht doesn't see, what it refuses to see, is that the battlefield has changed. The Americans are learning. Fast. Their tankers move like hunters now, working with air scouts, artillery, and the rhythm of the radio. The Panther may win a duel, but it cannot win a dance. In the fog-covered hills of Lorraine, the legend of German invincibility is about to meet the one thing it was never built to face: improvisation. They called the Panther unbeatable. In just a few days, that belief would burn, alongside the tanks that carried it. September 19th, 1944. Arracourt, Lorraine. The fog is thicker now, a heavy gray wall that swallows sound and shape alike. To anyone standing outside, the world ends 10 yards ahead. But inside the mist, engines growl, faint, uneven, metallic. Those are not American engines. Men of the 37th Tank Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, freeze in their hatches. No radar, no air scouts, just ears, instinct, and the rhythm of war. Across the valley, 2 German armored formations, Panzer Brigade 111 and 113, push forward in columns. The Panthers advance blind, trusting maps, compasses, and the myth of their own invincibility. At an intersection near the village of Rechicourt-le-Petit, Captain Bruce C. Clark listens to the faint rumble coming through the fog. He raises his hand and gives an order over the radio, voice low and calm. Let them come close. His men tense. Hatches slam shut. Turrets turn toward the sound. Somewhere ahead, diesel engines cough, closer now. Then a sharp metallic clank as a German driver downshifts. Through the mist, a dark hull emerges. The outline is unmistakable. The Panther OSFG. Its long 75mm gun scans the ridgeline. The Shermans wait, engines idling. They're hidden behind a low rise, just enough cover for the first shot to count. Clark whispers, "Target, left of the tree line. Range 200, the gunner steadies the sight. A breath, a heartbeat. Fire." The first round, high explosive, slams into the ground short of the target, spraying mud across the Panther's glacis plate. The German turret jerks, searching for the flash. Second round, closer. Third round, a near hit. Concussion echoing across the valley. Then the loader shoves an armor-piercing shell into the breach. Up! On the way! The gun recoils. The shell punches through the Panther's side armor at a perfect angle. For a moment, nothing. Then the hatch bursts open and a plume of orange flame erupts, curling skyward through the fog. Inside the Sherman, nobody speaks. They stare through the periscope, watching the legend burn. "We got one," the gunner mutters. "God help us, we got one." The smell of cordite and oil fills the cabin. The driver's hands shake, not from fear alone, but disbelief. The invincible Panther is gone in seconds. Radio chatter erupts. Enemy tanks burning. More approaching from the north. The relief lasts only an instant. Out of the haze, more silhouettes appear. 2, then 5, then 10. The battle is only beginning. Clark's voice cuts through the static. "Hold positions." Keep low. Make them guess where you are." The Shermans spread along the ridge, forming a loose arc. Their hulls are barely visible, like ghosts crouched in the earth. German gunners fire blind into the mist. Each shot sounds like thunder trapped in a tunnel. Shells crash into the hillsides, sending geysers of dirt into the air. Through it all, the American tankers work methodically. Load, fire, reposition. The pattern drilled into them since Fort Knox now decides who lives another minute. They fight by sound, not sight. Listening for engine notes, for the whine of a turret motor, for the cough of exhaust that betrays a Panther turning its flank. The fog that the Germans thought would protect them has become their cage. For 2 long hours, the fog refuses to lift. The battlefield has turned into a ghostly maze. Engines echo off the low hills. Men fight by memory and instinct. The Panthers advance, firing blind. Each shot sends shockwaves through the mist, churning the ground into fountains of mud. German commanders believe they are winning, their shells tearing through hedgerows, striking smoke and shadows. But they are chasing ghosts. The Americans are already moving. Shermans crawl along the ridgelines, flanking unseen, guided by radio and the sound of distant fire. They've learned the rhythm of the Panther's reload, the pause between its growl and its roar. That pause is where they live, and where they strike. A tank under Lieutenant James Leach spots 2 Panthers cresting a hill. He orders his driver to gun it, charging across open ground, a mad gamble that no manual ever approved. Dirt and smoke swallow the Sherman as it fires 3 rounds, high explosive, armor-piercing. The last one hits home. 1 Panther burns, the second retreats in panic, disappearing into the fog it once trusted. Across the line, Captain Bruce Clark keeps his composure. He calls for artillery and coordinates with the division's recon planes once the weather clears. His radio fills with chaos, overlapping call signs, static, half-finished screams. But he listens for the pattern, the beat of the battle itself. Everywhere, Panther crews are finding themselves blind, deaf, and hunted. Their advantage, long-range gunnery, means nothing when they can't see past 100 yards. Some fire at phantom shapes. Others stall out in soft soil, unable to turn fast enough before the Shermans close in. By noon, the fog thins. The fields of Lorraine reveal their scars. Smoking craters, twisted steel, the wrecks of both German and American machines. But more Panthers lie broken. Their dark hulls smolder in silence, engines melted into slag. A radio transmission from a German lieutenant is intercepted. They are everywhere. We can't tell where they come from. The Americans move faster than we can think inside one surviving Sherman, Sergeant Robert Early, the same man who faced a Panther that morning. Sits in silence, helmet resting on his knee. The smell of burned oil lingers. The paint inside the turret has bubbled from heat. His crew says nothing. Their faces are streaked with sweat and soot, eyes wide but hollow. "It's not like the movies," Early mutters. "You don't cheer when they burn. You just wait for the next one." At 2 p.m., the fog finally lifts. The horizon clears, and what it shows stuns even the veterans. Dozens of Panthers, once the pride of Germany, stand wrecked across the valley. The myth has cracked. The machine that was meant to turn the tide has been broken by improvisation, coordination, and raw nerve. Later that night, Clark writes in his field report, "Enemy armor destroyed in large numbers. Visibility poor. Morale excellent." But between the lines, another truth breathes. That this day changed how the Americans saw themselves. They had faced the best Germany had to offer, and they'd survived. Not by luck, not by numbers alone, but by learning faster, adapting in real time to a war that no textbook could prepare them for. The Battle of Arracourt would continue for 9 more days, and in that time, the Americans would destroy 86 German tanks, losing only 25 of their own. That day, one tanker later said, the myth of the Panther cracked open, and it never healed again. The smoke of battle settles, and what remains is the machine. For the soldiers who fought at Arracourt, survival often came down to what sat beneath them. 40 tons of metal, a roaring engine, and a few inches of armor between life and death. 2 machines defined that field: the American M4A3 Sherman and the German Panther AOSF-G. Both were products of genius, but born from very different philosophies. The Sherman weighed about 30 tons. It was compact, balanced, almost modest in its design. Under its engine deck sat a Ford GAAV-8, delivering 450 horsepower. Its armor, just over 2 inches thick, was sloped to deflect rather than absorb. Its main gun, the 75mm M3, wasn't the most powerful, but it could fire quickly and accurately. The Panther, by contrast, was a beast of 45 tons, driven by the Maybach HL230, a 700 horsepower monster built for speed on paper, but not in mud. Its front armor measured more than 3 inches at a steep angle. Its 75mm L70 cannon could punch through a Sherman from over a mile away. To the engineers of the Reich, it was perfection. Sleek, menacing, unstoppable. Yet perfection came with a price. Inside the Panther, the crew fought the machine almost as much as the enemy. The gearbox overheated after a single day's push. The final drive teeth sheared under strain. It guzzled fuel, twice as much as a Sherman, and Germany no longer had fuel to spare. Meanwhile, in America, factories in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago ran day and night. Men and women worked 12-hour shifts, turning out 8 Shermans per week per plant. Assembly lines hummed like clockwork, one chassis following another, a chain of steel feeding the front. Germany could build 1 Panther in the same time. Quantity became its own weapon. Every Sherman that rolled off the line carried more than armor. It carried logistics, reliability, and the certainty that replacements would always come. A captured German report later read, "For every Panther we lose, the Americans seem to gain 3 more. We cannot win a war of machines." On the battlefield, that truth played out in brutal clarity. When a Panther broke down, and many did, it was often abandoned or destroyed by its own crew. When a Sherman broke down, the crew fixed it with a wrench, a hammer, and, if needed, spare parts scavenged from another wreck. Half an hour later, it was back in formation. The Panther was a masterpiece trapped in theory. The Sherman was a working tool in the dirt. And that difference, not in numbers alone, but in philosophy, would decide the war's rhythm. Every war machine has its secret language, not of gears or gauges, but of motion. And on the battlefields of France, that language determined who lived and who burned. The Sherman spoke in speed and simplicity. Its turret could traverse in seconds, powered by an electric motor that hummed like a sewing machine. Its commander enjoyed a full periscope ring, giving nearly 360 degrees of vision, a small advantage that often meant survival. When danger appeared, the Sherman could pivot, fire, and reposition before a Panther could even complete its aim. To the men inside, it felt alive, a machine that answered when you asked. The Panther, by contrast, was power contained in a cage. Its 75-millimeter gun could tear through armor at 1,500 yards, yes, but only if it could see its prey and stand still long enough to take the shot. Its turret, manually cranked, turned slowly. Its optics were exquisite, but its field of view narrow, a predator with tunnel vision. On open plains, it was deadly. In the rolling, fog-covered hills of Lorraine, it was blind. A Panther could kill a Sherman with one hit. But the Sherman could call an airstrike, radio artillery, or swarm with 3 tanks at once. That, more than armor or caliber, became the new mathematics of war. The U.S. Army turned weakness into strategy. Sherman crews learned to fight in packs of 3. One tank would expose itself, a bait, drawing the Germans' fire. The other 2 would use the flash to find the Panther's position, then flank hard left and right, firing at its thinner side armor. Each move rehearsed in the mind, repeated in the mud. A dance of steel, dangerous, brutal, and fast. A tank commander described it later. It wasn't bravery. It was arithmetic. 3 of us against one of them. We'd lose 1, maybe 2. But the 3rd always got through. Overhead, American P-47 Thunderbolts orbited like hawks, waiting for coordinates. Once a Panther revealed itself by muzzle flash, the pilots dove, .50 caliber guns tearing into its rear deck, rockets splitting open fuel tanks. Coordination became the great equalizer. Where the Germans fought by rigid formation, the Americans fought by instinct and radio. Every tank a voice in a single conversation. By autumn of 1944, the U.S. Army had built a networked force. Armor, infantry, artillery, and air power all wired together through steel and static. It was messy, improvised, and loud. But it worked. The Panther, despite all its power, was isolated. Fuel shortages cut its range, supply lines broke under bombing, crews often lacked spare parts, even shells. Some Panthers went into battle with half their ammunition racks empty. One German officer later admitted, "We had the best tank in the world, but the world around it was falling apart." The Sherman was the opposite. Ordinary, abundant, everywhere. You could find one on every road, in every hedgerow, in every fight. And when one burned, another rolled up behind it, gun already loaded, engine already warm. It was not invincible. It was simply inevitable. By the fall of 1944, the war had turned into an equation. Tons of steel, gallons of fuel, hours of labor. Each side was doing the math, but only one could afford the answer. In America, factories were not just workshops, they were front lines. At the Detroit Arsenal tank plant, cranes swung day and night. Sparks rained over assembly lines as women in coveralls welded turret seams. Every 4 hours, another Sherman rolled off the line, tested, fueled, and shipped east by rail. Across the ocean, convoys stretched from New York to Cherbourg, ships stacked with spare parts, engines, even replacement guns. In Germany, under Allied bombing, the MN and Daimler-Benz plants struggled to build a single Panther in the same time it took America to build 8. Welding rods were scarce. Bearings came from looted factories. Engines were rushed, transmissions misaligned. Each Panther cost nearly $120,000. A Sherman, barely $45,000. Quantity, an American officer later said, wasn't just our weapon. It was our strategy. On paper, the Panther still looked superior. 45 tons, 700 horsepower, 8-centimeter frontal armor. But a weapon is only as strong as the system that feeds it. For every Panther sent west, 10 trucks carried fuel, ammunition, and spare treads. And the Reich was running out of all 3. For every Sherman, there was a pipeline of abundance. Rail cars, tankers, depots, and the tireless Red Ball Express roaring through the night. So when the shooting started, the numbers spoke louder than any gun. Visualize the field. 3 Shermans moved together through the fog, 1 forward, 2 wide. The first, call sign Baker 1, breaks cover and fires a shell that kicks up dirt in front of a waiting Panther. The German gun swings toward it, a hiss, a flash. The shell misses by a breath. That moment is the key. The 2 flanking Shermans, Charlie 2 and Dog 3, accelerate out of the mist. Tracks churn mud. Turrets rotate. They fire almost simultaneously, twin thunderclaps. 1 shell ricochets off the glacis, the other slams into the Panther's right flank, where armor is thinner. Smoke gushes from its vents. The crew bails out, stumbling through gray light as the tank burns behind them. Overhead, a P-47 Thunderbolt banks low, releasing a pair of rockets that streak down the valley. The explosion rolls like thunder, the finishing stroke of a well-timed machine. It's not poetry. It's procedure. A living algorithm written in steel and sweat. The Germans fought with precision. The Americans fought with systems. And systems, messy, adaptable, self-repairing, outlast perfection every time. In the weeks after Arracourt, U.S. ordnance officers tallied results. 86 German tanks destroyed. 25 Shermans lost. Mechanics recovered half of those and sent them back into action within days. Panthers that could be repaired were few. Many were left to rust where they died. From the perspective of the men who fought, the statistics never captured the smell, the fear, or the sound. But they proved a truth that every commander would remember long after the smoke cleared. In industrial war, reliability beats perfection. The Panther was a monument, a cathedral of steel too heavy for the world that built it. The Sherman was a factory tool, ugly and relentless. And in the mud of Lorraine, it was the tool, not the monument, that carried the day. September 29th, 1944. Lorraine, France. When the smoke cleared over Arracourt, the fields were littered with wreckage. Charred hulks of German Panthers lay scattered across the valley, black scars against the pale autumn grass. The final count stunned both sides. The Germans had lost 86 tanks. The Americans, 25 Shermans, half of which were later repaired and sent back into combat. For General George S. Patton, it was more than a victory. It was a revelation. In his field diary, he wrote, "We've learned to dance with them, and we lead." That dance, between armor and intellect, between engineering and improvisation, had changed the rhythm of the war. The German command was slow to believe it. Their after-action reports blamed the fog, the weather, the terrain. But deep in those pages, a sentence appeared that would echo through military academies for decades. The Panther was over-engineered and under-supported. It was an admission, quiet but damning. The German supertank doctrine, built on the idea that perfection and power could overcome numbers, had collapsed in the mud of Lorraine. Across the front, word spread like radio static. German tankers, veterans of Kursk and Normandy, began to whisper, "They always move faster than we can reload." Morale faltered. For the first time, crews doubted the machine that had been sold to them as invincible. In one intercepted message, a German lieutenant wrote to his superior, "Our engines fail before we find the enemy." The Americans attack from everywhere, like smoke with teeth. Meanwhile, on the American side, confidence surged. At the forward repair depots, mechanics joked that the Shermans never die. They just take a coffee break. Operational reports confirmed it. Sherman readiness stood at 90%. The Panthers? Barely 40. That number was more than statistics. It was psychology. It meant that for every Panther rolling toward the front, 2 sat dead in a field or waiting for a gearbox that would never come. Footage from reconnaissance planes shows the difference vividly. Columns of Shermans snake through the countryside, freshly refueled and resupplied by the Red Ball Express. In contrast, German formations break apart. Long convoys halted on roads, empty of fuel. Mechanics pushing a 45-ton machine with nothing but human strength and desperation. The myth of the super-tank, the armored god of the battlefield, was dying not with a bang, but with a slow, grinding silence of seized pistons and broken supply chains. Even the propaganda reels in Berlin began to change tone. Gone were the confident declarations of Panther über alles. In their place came phrases like heroic defense and strategic withdrawal. The truth was too heavy to hide. Germany could no longer sustain the weapons it had built to win. Patton's Third Army pressed the advantage. Each day, Shermans rolled deeper into Lorraine, clearing towns, chasing remnants of the Panzer brigades. The Americans had learned the secret that Germany had forgotten, that in modern war, victory doesn't belong to the strongest machine, but to the one that keeps moving. In a letter home, one tank crewman wrote, "The Panther looked beautiful until you heard it cough. Then it was just a coffin waiting for fire." The contrast was poetic, but cruelly true. As autumn turned to winter, German strategists faced the unthinkable. Their armored divisions, once the pride of Europe, were fighting on half their strength, burning precious fuel just to reposition, losing tanks not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure. A U.S. intelligence officer summarized it best. "The Germans built racehorses. We built mules, and mules eat less, carry more, and never stop walking." That was the moment of no return, when the myth cracked and belief gave way to exhaustion. No matter how many Panthers Germany fielded, the war machine behind them was already rusting. In the weeks that followed, the shock from Arracourt rippled far beyond the fog of Lorraine. In Berlin, it struck the heart of the Panzerwaffe, the once proud armored corps that had carried Germany across Europe. Officers who had grown up under the legend of Blitzkrieg now faced an uncomfortable truth. The storm had slowed, the machine had broken, and the rhythm of victory was gone. After-action conferences turned somber. Engineers blamed logistics. Logisticians blamed fuel. Commanders blamed the weather or fate or anything that wasn't the collapse of doctrine itself. But buried inside a confidential report from Oberkommando des Heers, one sentence stood out. "The Panther cannot function without the system it was promised." And that system no longer exists. It was the quiet obituary of German armored supremacy. Meanwhile, American analysts studied the wrecks at Arracourt with the curiosity of surgeons. Ordnance teams crawled over the burned Panthers, measuring impact angles, penetration marks, and armor spalling. They realized something vital. The Sherman didn't need to be stronger. It just needed to work longer. A lieutenant from the 4th Armored Division wrote, "We feared them until we saw them up close. Then we realized they die like anything else, if you hit the right place." The myth had blinded both sides. To the Germans, it had promised invincibility. To the Americans, it had whispered doom. At Arracourt, both illusions went up in smoke. Inside Germany, the psychological toll was worse than the mechanical one. Tank crews, once the elite of the Wehrmacht, now felt trapped in their own machines. They called the Panther a steel coffin, too heavy to retreat, too fragile to rely on. Some sabotaged their own vehicles when ordered into hopeless counterattacks. Fuel shortages made movement almost ceremonial. Tanks driven a few miles, then parked like monuments to a dying empire. At night, in the bunkers of Nancy and Saarbrücken, officers read intercepted Allied broadcasts describing the battle. One in particular struck a nerve. A U.S. radio host called the Sherman the mule that outran the tiger. Even propaganda had turned poetic, and for the first time, German officers could not argue back. By late October, the U.S. Army had compiled its assessment. Arracourt proved that technology alone could not save a failing army. The report noted the contrast in operational readiness. Sherman's at 90%, Panthers below 40%, and concluded, "A tank that moves and fires is superior to one that waits for spare parts." The phrase would echo into the next generation of military design. In Washington, ordnance planners highlighted the lesson in bold ink. Reliability is combat power. It became a mantra, one that guided every American tank that followed, from the M26 Pershing to the M1 Abrams. For Germany, there was no time to recover. By winter, the remaining Panthers were scattered across the Ardennes, scraped together for a final gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. They still fought fiercely, but something had changed. The crews no longer believed the myth. They went into battle not with the confidence of conquerors, but with the grim endurance of men who knew the outcome was already written. A captured German corporal said it best: "We didn't fear the Americans anymore. We feared the numbers. For every tank we lost, they sent 3 more, and they never stopped coming." That was the echo of Arracourt. Not a single victory, but the moment when faith gave way to fatigue. In the archives of the U.S. Army, one small photo remains. A line of Shermans crossing the Merthyr River, tracks glistening with mud, crews waving to the villagers who lined the bridge. In the distance, the smoke of burned Panthers still hangs in the valley. That image tells the story better than any report. The Panther was magnificent, but it belonged to an empire that could no longer sustain it. The Sherman was ordinary, but it belonged to a nation that refused to stop moving. "We've learned to dance with them," Patton had said, "and we lead." And from that moment on, America would never stop leading. The war in Europe ended in 1945, but its lessons never did. In the ruins of Germany, engineers from every army studied the carcasses of tanks scattered across the continent. Panthers, Tigers, Shermans, Churchills, all silent now, their steel bones cooling in the rain. Yet within that silence, a new doctrine was being born. From Arracourt to the Rhine, the Sherman had proven something no textbook ever taught: that mobility, reliability, and coordination could outfight raw power. That a good enough machine, backed by a great system, was more dangerous than any masterpiece built in isolation. When the smoke cleared, the generals called it the Mobility First Doctrine. The Allies had learned the hard way that war is not won by perfection, but by persistence. The Germans had built machines that demanded flawless logistics. The Americans had built machines that forgave human error. That difference would shape the next half-century of military design. In the years that followed, both superpowers studied the battlefield lessons of Lorraine. In Washington and Moscow, engineers pored over captured blueprints and combat reports. The conclusion was the same on both sides of the Iron Curtain. The future belonged to the tank that could move, not the one that could pose. The United States designed the M26 Pershing, then the Patton series, each faster, simpler, and easier to repair than what came before. The Soviets, who watched the same lesson unfold through their T-34s, doubled down on the same philosophy. Low profile, wide tracks, simple engines, easy mass production. From NATO to the Warsaw Pact, the shadow of Arracourt loomed large. In war colleges, instructors wrote it on chalkboards in thick white letters. In industrial war, reliability beats perfection. But the legacy of the Sherman went beyond blueprints and doctrines. It became a symbol of industrial pragmatism, the American belief that function matters more than fame. Where the Panther was a monument to craftsmanship, the Sherman was a monument to teamwork. To the welders in Detroit, the truck drivers of the Red Ball Express, the farmers who built its parts between harvests. Every tank was a promise that no soldier would be left without the tools to fight back. And that promise outlasted the war. Even decades later, long after the last Panther rusted away, the Sherman rolled on, in Korea, in the Middle East, in training grounds around the world. It became the teacher of an era, a steel reminder that no victory comes from brilliance alone. There's an old film reel kept in the U.S. Army archives, black and white, silent except for the hum of an old projector. It shows a column of Shermans crossing the Rhine River in the spring of 1945. Floodlights sweep across their decks. Soldiers wave from open hatches. The water glitters beneath them like mercury. No music, no speeches, just motion. Those tanks, scratched, patched, and weathered, represent the truest lesson of Arracourt. That progress is not a straight line, but a grind, steel against mud, will against fear. In industrial war, a narrator might say, reliability beats perfection. And in that truth, you find the real heart of victory, not in the brilliance of machines, but in the endurance of the men who kept them running. The battlefield is quiet now. The guns have stopped. The engines are still. In the golden light of evening, American tankers move slowly among the wrecks, wiping soot from their faces, cleaning the blackened barrels of their M4 Shermans. One man helps a wounded German crewman from the turret of a burned-out Panther. For a brief moment, the war feels human again. Sunlight filters through the smoke, painting the metal ruins in gold. The camera lingers on a single inscription scratched into the armor of a Sherman. "Keep her running." Major General John S. Wood of the 4th Armored Division once said, "A tank is only as strong as the men inside it." That truth still echoes. From Arracourt to every battlefield that followed, they built the Sherman to win one war. But its lesson, the power of teamwork, reliability, and will, still guides every army today. If you enjoyed this story of ingenuity and courage, like, comment, and subscribe, and join us for the next forgotten victory.